Have you ever stared into the face of someone who shares your blood and understood, truly understood, that you'd become nothing but a line item they wanted to erase? $32. That was everything I had while November rain cut through my jacket like it wasn't even there. I hadn't blown it on anything reckless. My shoulder tore at the factory, cost me my job, and my older brother Derek decided that made me deadweight. Before that day ended, I'd wager my last $30 on a corroded storage unit and crack open a $4 million secret that would strip his lies bare. But in that moment, I was just a man with nothing, gripping a black trash bag in the rain. It's purely a business matter, Caleb. Derek said it from the doorway of the house where we both grew up. The house our mother left to both of us. Somehow, he'd maneuvered himself into position as the sole executor of her estate. He wouldn't look at me. Brenda stood behind him, arms folded, wearing that particular expression, half pity, half clock-watching. I lost my job because of my shoulder, Derek, I said. The rain hammered the porch's tin roof so hard, I could barely hear my own voice. Quote 2, Quote 3. His jaw locked tight. Quote 4. He pushed a bulging industrial trash bag across the threshold with the toe of his boot. 30 years of being brothers, wiped out by some overdue utility bills and a medical expense I couldn't cover. My fists were clenched so tight my knuckles ached. I didn't swing. I bent down, heaved that bag onto my less damaged shoulder, and walked off the driveway without turning around. 3 miles along Route 8, car steering past, throwing frozen slush against my jeans. I found shelter under the sagging awning of a boarded-up diner and dropped the bag on cracked concrete. My hands shook as I dug into my wet pocket. A wrinkled 20, a 10, 2 singles, $32. Not enough for a motel. Not enough for a bus ticket to anywhere that mattered. I stood there staring at damp bills, doing arithmetic on how many days of dollar menu meals they'd buy. That's when a bright neon orange sign across the 4-lane highway grabbed me. Secure all storage. Public auction today, 2 o'clock. My phone screen was shattered, but the time was clear enough, 1:45. I'd watched those storage auction shows on TV. Loud guys cracking open units to find safes full of gold, rare collectibles. I also knew the truth. Most abandoned units held stained mattresses, broken Christmas ornaments, and the sad wreckage of lives that fell apart. But desperation bends your logic into shapes you wouldn't recognize. The alternative was sitting under that awning with $32, letting the cold slowly finish what Derek started. I needed something, a distraction, a long shot. I crossed the highway, nearly clipped by a semi doing 60, and hauled my trash bag through the gates of Secure All Storage. The crowd was thin, maybe 10 people clustered under umbrellas, following a stocky man with a clipboard and a voice that carried like a cannon. Jim Lawson, local auctioneer. Known for speed and zero patience. All right, folks, listen up, Jim barked, swiping rain from his forehead. Standard rules. Door goes up, you look from the threshold. Don't cross the line, don't touch a thing. Cash only, paid on the spot. You buy it, you haul it out by sundown tomorrow. Moving on to Unit 114. I drifted to the back of the group. These were regulars, you could tell. Greg Miller, pawn shop owner with a reputation for ruthlessness, stood there in a leather duster, gnawing a waterlogged unlit cigar. Beatrice, an antique dealer with eyes that missed nothing. A handful of scrap metal guys hunting cheap copper and old appliances. The door on Unit 114 rolled up. Inside was a pristine leather sectional sofa, several flat-screen televisions, and rows of neatly organized plastic bins. Bidding opened at $200 and shot to $800 within moments. Greg Miller claimed the win with a smug grin. Unit 128 went for $400. Unit 205 sold for $650. With every padlock Jim cracked open, my hope shrank a little more. I felt like a trespasser at a rich man's game. My $32 meant nothing here. By the time we reached the back section of the facility, the oldest stretch where corrugated metal roofs wore deep rust stains, the crowd had thinned considerably. Rain hammered harder. The temperature kept falling. Quote, _7__. Jim sighed, guiding us toward Unit 402. Orange paint curled off the door in long, brittle strips. Quote, _8__. Jim nodded to the facility manager, who stepped forward with heavy bolt cutters and clamped down on the rusted padlock. It snapped with a dry crack. Jim grabbed the handle and hauled the metal door upward. It screamed against its tracks, shedding flakes of rust like dead skin. The smell hit us instantly. A suffocating wall of mildew, rotting cardboard, and stale earth. Several people physically stepped back. Greg Miller aimed his flashlight into the darkness and laughed loud. The place was a catastrophe. Junk was wedged in floor to ceiling with no logic whatsoever. A mangled bicycle frame rusted beyond recognition. Stacks of cardboard boxes collapsed from a bad roof leak. A shredded futon mattress hemorrhaging yellow stuffing. And beneath all of it, an incomprehensible tangle of debris. No furniture shapes, no plastic storage bins, just waterlogged wreckage. Quote, _9___. Greg sneered, already turning away. Quote, _10__. Beatrice didn't even raise her flashlight. She shook her head and walked back toward her van. All right, don't everyone bid at once, Jim said flatly. Somebody give me $50. 50 for the entire lot. Do I hear 50? Nothing. Just rain tapping asphalt. Come on, people. I need this unit cleared. $30. Somebody give me 30. There's got to be scrap metal in there at least. $30. My hand drifted toward my pocket on its own. Fingertips grazed the crumpled 20 and the 10. If I bought this, I'd have $2 left. $2. But standing there, peering into that dark, damp mouth of Unit 402, something cold ran through me that had nothing to do with the wind. It was deeper than thought. A pull in my gut I couldn't name. Call it instinct. Call it the recklessness of a man who has already lost everything there is to lose. Before the rational part of my brain could stop me, my voice cut through the silence. I'll take it for 30. Every remaining head turned. Greg Miller paused mid-step, looked me over. The soaked clothes, the pale face, the black trash bag at my feet. He let out a short, pitying laugh. Have fun at the dump, kid, Greg muttered, flipping his collar up as he walked off. Jim Lawson studied me with something between surprise and sorrow. $30 to the young man in the denim jacket. Going once. Going twice. Sold. I walked up to Jim with hands shaking so badly I could barely fish the damp bills from my pocket. 120, 110. I pressed them into his palm. Jim handed me the receipt and a fresh padlock to secure the door until I could clear the unit. You've got 24 hours to empty it, son, he said quietly, watching me shiver. Don't leave a single piece behind, or the facility hits you with a fine. I understand, I whispered. Jim headed for his truck, and then the full weight of what I'd done crashed over me. I stood alone in the driving rain, staring into a 10x10 metal box stuffed with rotting garbage. I had just traded my last shred of security for another person's trash. My knees buckled on the wet asphalt. I dropped my face into my hands and let out a raw, broken sob. I don't know how long I stayed there on that cold pavement. Eventually, the brutal chill forced me upright. The storage facility stood nearly empty now. Main gates locked to all incoming traffic. Only a pedestrian exit still worked. The overcast afternoon had bled into something deeper, a thick and total darkness. I hauled my trash bag into the unit, keeping it clear of the rain, then pulled the rolling door down halfway against the wind. Inside, nothing but black. I fished out my phone, opened the flashlight app, balanced it on an overturned chair. A weak cone of light hid the chaos. __, quote _20 __. I whispered, breath clouding in the frozen air. Quote 21. I started at the front, one ruined object at a time. The labor warmed my muscles, but every piece I moved dragged my hope a little lower. The cardboard boxes had practically dissolved. The moment I tried lifting one, the bottom gave out. Moldy, waterlogged magazines cascading across the concrete. National Geographics from the 1980s, fused together by water damage, completely worthless. Then the futon mattress. Years of roof leaks had turned it into a soaking deadweight. I wrestled it toward the threshold, gasping. My injured shoulder fired that sharp, familiar pain. By 10 o'clock at night, the front half of the unit was cleared. Everything had pulled out, sat in a massive heap just beyond the door. I was wrecked, starving, filthy. Dust and black mold spores caked every inch of my clothes. Phone battery, 15%. I dropped onto an overturned plastic bucket and stared at what remained. The back half of the unit hid beneath a large, heavy-duty canvas tarp. Thick material, military grade, blanketed in years of accumulated grime. But the tarp had done its job. Whatever it covered appeared untouched by the water damage that had gutted everything else. I grabbed the stiff edge of the fabric, yanked it back hard. Dust erupted into a blinding cloud. I doubled over coughing, eyes burning. When it cleared, I aimed the dying glow of my phone toward the rear wall. And there, untouched by the rot and ruin surrounding them, sat 5 heavy, dull gray metal bars stacked together. Each one roughly brick-sized. Substantial. Coated in what looked like cheap, matte gray primer. Flaking in patches. They were propping up a massive antique steamer trunk. The trunk itself was something else entirely. Magnificent. Completely wrong for this graveyard of forgotten possessions. Rich, dark mahogany. Heavy brass corner reinforcements. Dual iron lock clasps. Leather straps across the top, dry and cracked, but holding. Dead center, a tarnished brass plate fixed to the wood, engraved in ornate cursive, E. H. Sterling. My heart stopped mid-beat. Sterling. I had lived in Akron my whole life. Anyone who knew Rust Belt history knew that name. Elijah H. Sterling, industrial titan of the 1920s. A man who owned half the steel mills in the state before his family's empire mysteriously crumbled in the 1970s. The rumors never died. The fortune wasn't lost to bad investments. A paranoid heir had hidden it. But that was local legend, campfire talk. Surely this was just an old piece of furniture. I knelt in front of the trunk, reached for one of those gray metal bars beneath it, meaning to shift it aside. The instant my fingers closed around it and I pulled, my arm wrenched downward. I gasped. It hit the concrete with a deafening clang that echoed through the unit. Impossibly heavy, far beyond iron or steel. High school chemistry flooded back. Density calculations. I grabbed a flathead screwdriver I'd found earlier in the debris and scraped it hard against the peeling gray surface. The primer chipped away like nothing, and underneath, catching the faint, dying beam of my flashlight, a bright, unmistakable, buttery gleam. Not silver. Gold. My breath locked in my chest. I scraped faster, tearing away strips of gray paint. Beneath them, stamped clean into the glowing metal, Credit Suisse, 400 ounces. Fine gold, 999.9. I couldn't recall the exact spot price of gold, but I knew it hovered somewhere around $2,000 an ounce. My mind stuttered, trying to do the math. Over $800,000 in a single bar. 5 of them lay on that concrete floor. I lurched backward, scrambling from those bars like they might burn me alive. My lungs locked. air wouldn't come. More than $4 million in solid gold bullion sitting in a storage unit I'd bought for $30. Someone had coated them in flat gray paint so they'd pass for industrial scrap, hidden in plain sight under a fortress of garbage. But why? Who had left them here to rot? My eyes drifted upward from the gold to the mahogany trunk the bars had been propping up. If $4 million in bullion was just a pedestal, what was inside the box? I crawled toward the trunk on hands and knees. My fingers shook so badly, the flashlight beam danced across the walls. 2 iron clasps held the lid shut, each fitted with heavy antique brass locks. I had no key. I grabbed the rusted tire iron I'd pulled from that wrecked bicycle earlier, jammed the flat end under the right clasp, threw every pound I had onto the lever. Old wood screamed. Then a sharp crack. Screws ripping free from mahogany, the lock shearing loose. I did the same on the left side, shredding my knuckles against the brass edge in the process. Didn't feel a thing. I hurled the tire iron into the darkness, drew one slow breath, and heaved the domed lid of that steamer trunk open. Cedar, aged paper, machine oil. The smell rolled out like a ghost. The interior was bone dry. Lined in immaculate red velvet, 3 objects rested on that velvet, arranged with deliberate care. A thick leather-bound ledger, a heavy canvas bank bag creamed shut with a lead seal, and a plain manila envelope. I reached for the ledger first, cracked the stiff leather cover. Page after page of handwritten accounting stretching back to 1982. But these weren't business records, they were lists. Names, dates, and large dollar figures marked simply as __quote _22__. As I scanned those names, the blood left my face. These were not nobodies. The former chief of police, the last 2 mayors of Akron, state judges, a prominent real estate developer who currently owned half the downtown district. And there, page 3, listed beside a $50,000 cash payout dated 1985, was a name I knew in my bones. Arthur Mercer, my father. A low-level city inspector who died 10 years back, leaving nothing but debt and a small house. Yet according to this ledger, he'd been collecting substantial off-the-books payments from the Sterling family for an entire decade. My phone buzzed hard enough to jolt me. The ledger slipped from my hands. Battery warning, 5%. I snatched up the manila envelope and ripped it open. 1 typed sheet of paper. 1 black and white photograph. The photo showed my father, years younger, standing in front of this very storage facility, shaking hands with a man I'd never seen. The typed letter was dated the 14th of October, 1999. It read, "Derek, if you are reading this, the old man has finally passed. The cash in Unit 402 is yours, as we agreed. The bullion is your severance. Keep Caleb out of it. He has too much of his mother's conscience, and he'll ruin everything if he finds out where the money came from. Do not access the unit until the heat dies down." I read those words once, then again, then a 3rd time until the letters smeared together. Derek. The brother who had just thrown me out into the rain. The brother who swore our parents died with nothing. He didn't know. Derek had never come for this unit. He must have lost the paperwork, or assumed it had been auctioned off years ago when the rental payment stopped. He'd walked away from his hidden fortune, and through some cruel joke of the universe, I had just bought it back for my last $30. Right then, outside the rolling metal door, tires ground heavy over wet gravel. Headlights knifed through the gap beneath the door, throwing long, sharp shadows across the gold bars. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps slapped through standing water, moving with purpose toward Unit 402. "Hey, anyone in there?" Greg Miller's gruff voice cut through the downpour. I killed my flashlight. Total darkness swallowed me whole. My heart threw itself against my ribs like something caged. Outside, those heavy boots crunched closer over wet gravel, then stopped. Inches from the half-rolled corrugated door, Greg Miller's voice bounced off the damp concrete. "I know you're in there. Roll it up!" Panic flooded my chest. I jammed the manila envelope and the leather-bound ledger deep into the inside pocket of my soaked denim jacket. Moving fast but silent, I grabbed the heavy military canvas tarp and flung it back over the mahogany trunk and the 5 gold bars. I smoothed it flat, praying the thick fabric would hide the unmistakable outline of a multi-million-dollar fortune. 20 minutes later, we stood at the back of the unit. I scraped gray paint off the nearest bar. Flawless buttery gold gleamed underneath. Tom physically staggered backward. "Caleb, is that 400 ounces?" His voice barely above a whisper. "Each." I let that word sit. "And the trunk holds evidence that will put my brother in federal prison." Tom's face went stone hard. We worked in terrified silence. Winched the trunk and the bullion onto the flatbed. Buried them beneath a rusted washing machine Tom kept in the back. By 2 in the morning, Unit 402 was locked with my padlock. Nothing inside but rotting garbage. Millions in gold rolled quietly into the dark. The next morning, I sat in the cramped, windowless office of Tom's salvage yard. 5 gold bars rested on his steel workbench, completely stripped of their gray primer. They caught the harsh fluorescent light, utterly alien against greasy tools and spare tires. Across from the gold sat David Horowitz, federal prosecutor. Tom knew him through old family connections. David was sharp, clinical. He'd spent the last 3 hours meticulously combing through the leather-bound ledger and the typed letter. __quote _30__. David said finally, looking up, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. My voice came out cold. David tapped his pen against the ledger. He paused. I said, leaning forward, "Quote 37, quote. Quote 38, quote," David warned. Quote 39, quote. Quote 40, quote. Tom stepped in, arms crossed behind me. Quote 41, quote. In return, the Federal Bureau of Investigation recognizes Caleb as a good faith purchaser and confidential informant. He turns over the gold. But you authorize the standard 20% informant and finder's share from the seized assets. That's my price for the ledger, I said, calm, steady. David reached his hand across the table, slowly. We have a deal, but first, we need to catch your brother in the act. Prove he orchestrated the proxy bid. My new prepaid phone buzzed. Caller ID read Derek. I answered and hit speaker. Caleb? Derek's voice came through tight, strained. Panic underneath, but he was fighting hard to sound casual. Look, I caught wind of a strange rumor that you picked up an old storage unit on Route 8 yesterday. Unit 402. That true? I looked at David. He gave me a solid nod. Yeah, paid $30 for it. Nothing but junk inside. Planning to head over in about an hour and haul everything out. Wait! Derek nearly shouted. Don't throw anything away. I used to rent that unit. There are personal family keepsakes in there. I'll hand you $5,000 cash for that lock key right now. We can meet at the restaurant across the highway. 10,000, I said. Flat. No emotion in my voice whatsoever. Bring it in a briefcase. Done, Derek answered without hesitation. 1 hour later, I sat in a booth at the diner across from Secure All Storage. Derek walked in, looking rattled. He dropped into the seat and shoved a fat manila envelope toward me. 10 grand. Hand over the key, Caleb. I didn't touch the envelope. Instead, I reached into my jacket, pulled out a photocopy of that typed letter from the trunk, and slid it across the table. Derek's eyes dropped to the page. The moment he saw his own name, every drop of color left his face. That polished confidence of his, gone. You sold me out for a payday, I said, voice barely above a whisper. You wanted me sidelined so you could grab father's dirty money without me asking questions. Caleb, please, Derek stuttered. His hands were shaking. We can split it. We're brothers. We were brothers yesterday, I said, standing up from the booth. When I was standing in the rain. I walked out of that diner without the money. The second I pushed through those glass doors, 3 unmarked black SUVs swept into the parking lot. Federal agents poured out and rushed inside to arrest him. I pulled my collar tight against the cold wind and headed toward Tom's truck. Left my old life right there in that parking lot. I walked away from that storage unit carrying more than a fortune. I walked away with my dignity. Derek lost the house to legal fees. The corrupt officials got federal indictments. Now I live in a small farmhouse in Medina. Quiet life. Sometimes the very bottom becomes the only ground solid enough to rebuild on. $30 bought me an honest new start. I am never looking back.